Our next speaker is Dr. Tarun Chhabra. Dr. Tarun Chhabra is a senior ecologist and a practicing doctor. He's an ethnobotanist and the Todas expert. He's a full-time dentist in Otty, and he started Toda Nalavaazhvu Sangam in 1992 to help preserve the rich cultural heritage of the Todas people. He's also founded EBR. Doc, I'm not going to try and say it because I don't think I'll say it right. To carry out the ecological restoration and botanical studies in the Nilgiris, and initiated a project to propagate the endangered Toda buffalo breed that is endemic to the Nilgiris. He's also author of a book, the Magnum Opus, the Toda Landscape, Explorations in Cultural Ecology. Today, Dr. Tarun would be speaking on two-way science, learning from the Todas in the midst of global environmental challenge. Please welcome Dr. Tarun Chhabra.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here. So the Todas occupy the Nilgiri highlands, at elevations of up to 2,500 meters. And the Toda homeland constitutes the core area of the NBR, and it is due to their management practices that it was accorded us. So I have to go over it very fast, and I'll skip a few things. But there are about 100 species of plants that are endemic to the Nilgiris. That's why it's sometimes known as an upland island, because of the sheer escarpments at the edges. So it's a major plant speciation area. We also have these prehistoric sites like these stone circles related to the Toda people all over the Nilgiris in the upper plateau, rock art in the Toda country. I'll go over it very fast because I have a very short time. Dolmens, cysts, etc. Please forgive me. This is the Toda salutation. You can see some portraits of the Toda people, the women with their tattooed arms, etc., the youngest people. And the Toda relationship with nature begins right from the birth rituals. When the neonate is a passive spectator, when its mother handles a number of specified plant species, at the culmination of which somebody cuts an umbrella of the Nilgiri holly, Mahonia, and holds it over them to protect them from the evil influence of a star. And thereafter, during the naming ceremony, a proud grandfather uncovers the child's face outdoors for the first time and shows him the rising sun, the plants, the water bodies, what he's showing him, the buffalo pen, what you can see here, you can see he's showing him the lamp lit inside the temple. And as he uncovers the child's face, he also announces his name, which is usually derived from the sacred geography landmark of that area. For example, this grandfather's own father was known as Moji, after a sacred pool that I'll be showing you about. So the first major connection of the Toda people with nature in ancient times began when the gods left their bodies and occupied 34 deity hills, where they are still believed to reside. And their presence is so real that even today, a Toda elder will not commit the sacrilege of pointing out their location. And in addition to these deity hills, there are some other hills that are sacred to particular clans. And in addition to this, there are scores of other hills that are sacred to many hamlets in their vicinity, and they all figure in their prayers. So there are about 200 hills that are sanctified. So this was the first connection with nature in ancient times. And the second connection with nature began when the goddess Tekiji divided her people into several patrilineal clans. And each one of these clans had specific hamlets, and all of them had a prayer. And the prayer is basically constituted of sacred prayer words to the sacred landmarks, be they the pools, the thickets, the trees, the valleys, etc. So hundreds of aspects of their natural geography became sanctified by this act. And the third act, the connection with nature, began when the god En decided to set up the afterworld. And he took a long and arduous route, crossing about 15 landmarks. And what is amazing is that all the landmarks, mythical landmarks that he crossed, can be seen as actual physical sites on the field, including the stupendous stone steps. These are natural stone steps that the spirit is supposed to ascend en route. I'll give you one more example. When the departing spirit comes to the midway point between the two worlds, he comes to this massive Charnoketic rock, And you can see a natural band running through the center of that. He stops there. The earlier picture, you saw the affinal cloth ceremony at his funeral. He exchanges the cloth with one of his relatives who has come and begins the next half of the journey. So this was a major connection with nature, the third one, because only the people who have followed all the rites of passage from birth to death, using scores of species of specified plants, only they can journey to the afterworld, crossing these landmarks. These are major connects. This is from the hill Temushkul, from where the deity En rules the afterworld. In addition, the two major rivers of the Nilgiris are also treated as deities. And they've also had specific crossing points on the course of this river. What you see here is the crossing point known as Tevajiva on the Avalanche River. And these crossing points were set up basically to prevent their defilement. And they were separate for the lay people and separate for the priests. This is a sacred crossing point known as Argva on what is now known as the Paikara River. Rendered all the more sacred because of the presence of a deity known as Alway. On the left you can see what the Todas believe is his door-like abode to his abode. The door-like entrance there. And every April, the Todas gather on this hilltop known as Poj, and they pray to the Paikara River deity flowing below for ecological well-being. The people living in the plains are blissfully unaware that the bountiful water that flows out from the Nilgiris is due largely to the sanctification and the management practices followed by the Toda people since millennia. For them, it's just something flowing out of their faucets. It's bereft of sanctity, the water. So these are the best wetlands. The best carbon sinks have been now inundated by these hydroelectric reservoirs. We don't have time to talk about them. But the locally sacred waters of the Todas are the mainstay of their culture. Each and every one of the Toda hamlets has several waters. This is the ordination ceremony going on. Their saltwater ceremonies. So each one of these tiny hamlets has these several water sources around them. They have to protect their nature. And then Mojiker, we saw the grandfather, his father was named after the sacred hill, after the sacred water. This is the ordination ceremony taking place at specific water sources. Since if they're higher grade dairy temples, it takes longer to this thing. These are some sanctified water bodies of the Todas mentioned in their prayers. And some of them are related to the dream time, when the gods and goddesses did different things I don't have time to explain, which are also sanctified the sacred waters. And each one of the scores of Toda dairy temples has a specific water source from which only the dairymen priests may draw water. Nobody else can touch those waters. Yeah, so when the Todas are aware that when certain species are not found in the Shola grassland climax ecosystem, the ecosystem is in a state of decline. As you know, this is the Shola grassland mosaic. I'll go over this fast. These are some facets of priestly life coming out to draw water from the sacred dairy temple stream, conducting certain ceremonies there. This is the facets of priestly life. In this mundane, seemingly mundane process of dairying, the Todas have incorporated a mind-boggling array of rituals. So this is how the Toda priests and the people pray with one hand only, as you can see here. Facets of priestly life. If you want to see Toda culture at its pristine best, you have to visit them at their seasonal hamlets where they go for a couple of months. I'll give you one example. You know, when we were looking some years back, when we were searching for the lost orchid of Nilgiris, Liparis biloba, we finally found it in the Shola around this pristine seasonal hamlet. So these are some seasonal hamlets. In certain places, only the priest may migrate with the buffalo herds. Families are not allowed because of the sheer sanctity of these places. Around each and every Toda hamlet, you have many stones, which not only have prayer words, but also rituals performed like you can see here. And there are other rocks which are related to mythical stories, many of them, like a couple who went on a pilgrimage, and they came back in a state of impurity. And you can see one person the man is looking there, she's looking at a village below, they got petrified and turned to stone. And around every major hamlet, you have these big oval stones. And after a ceremony, the young Toda boys lift them and put them onto their left shoulder as a prowess of strength. These are sacred rocks. And then related to the mythical times, this cylindrical rock was used by the god to dam this stream. Again, another god did a long jump and they marked it. There's a story associated with that. On this rock, the goddess Tekisi used to grind her herbs. This is the snake stone. So by sanctifying all these rocky areas, they have protected their environment. So sacred temple complexes like this, what you see here, the entire ecosystem around this, where this conical temple is inviolate. And many of these places, even today, you can see, they have their own microclimate. They're somewhat immune to global climate change. The Toda buffaloes, just like their masters, are endemic to the Nilgiris, and they represent a distinct breed of the Asiatic water buffalo. They have split them into the temple buffaloes of different hierarchical grades for the different temple dairies, and the domestic buffaloes are the secular ones. And I must mention here that the Todas are the original buffalo whisperers. You know, they're the people who have spoken and whispered and spoken to their semi-feral animals. The Todas have no headman system traditionally. They sit like this in a circle and settle all disputes democratically. And being non-martial race, their relationship with fauna is different. This is the pied bush chat, the female, which is known as kupeji in Toda, and the male, because it looks different, the male is known as karpils. And this bird is supposed to warn an errant priest when he commits a transgression in a sacred daring rule. So this is how they relate to fauna. And even the tiger is deemed to be the protector of the sacred landscape. And when it turns as the aggressor, if it attacks the sacred buffaloes, they introspect and they haul up the priest and say, you did something wrong. So this is how they introspect. And the Todas have phenomenal biological knowledge about tigers, the Nilgiri tar, the wild dog dhol, etc. You know, this is the wrist burning ceremony taking place during the 7th month of pregnancy in the pitch darkness of the new moon night. After this, another ritual where she prostrates herself towards an imitation dairy temple that has been put up. Somebody brings a sacred calf, and water is poured from one bamboo reed to another over this calf's back, and this sanctified water is given to the pregnant lady to drink. These sticks represent a Kurumba couple, Kurumba tribal couple, and she's cooking rice there and serving it to them to appease their spirits. Specific leaf cups only are to be used for these ceremonies. And after this, you have the paternity rites. Number of plant species are used. At the culmination of this, the groom cuts Saphora glauca, fabricates an imitation bow and arrow which he hands over to his wife. And the next ritual begins where a niche has been cut into this specific syzygium tree, a ghee lamp has been lit, and the next ritual begins. So in this ceremony, 9 specific species of plants are to be used. They cannot be substituted. So they have to be available around each and every Toda hamlet. They have to be collected in the pitch darkness of the night for the pregnancy ones. I'll skip this. So we spoke about priestly ordination. Some of the higher grade of dairy temples, more plants are to be used. It takes several days, all specified plants. There are certain ceremonies where the flora that is used, like this euphorbia, cannot be used for mundane purposes and thus protected by the given sanctity. The Todas are architects par excellence among first societies. Their barrel water structures are inspired by the miniature rainbows that you find in the hills. And not a single nail is used in these structures. They're marvels of creation. And the Todas understood which bamboos had the best tensile strength, and they also understood which grass had the best waterproofing properties, and they used them to excellent effect. And the conical temples of the Todas have been described as the primitive prototypes for the South Indian temples Vimana. The Toda ecological footprint is still very light. They are non-martial, pastoral people. And the Todas even now understand that they're just the custodians and neither the masters nor the owners of their homeland. And every single day, the Toda life is circumscribed by nature and not the other way around like we are trained to believe. They have used plants to indicate the seasons of the year. When these plants flower, they know that the monsoon has just set in. And when this anemone is mass flowering, it indicates that the monsoon is at its peak. And when this Nilgiri lily is flowering, they know the monsoon has entered the last phase. And in September, when the sholas have been painted white by Mikalia Nilgirika, the Todas know that the monsoon is going to end shortly. As climatic indicators, one example, the climatic condition between the two monsoons is known as Kasht in Toda. And during that time in the night sky, there's a heavenly body, planetary body known as Pleiades that also has the same name, and this plant also has the same name. So the Todas understood in those days that the planetary bodies influence the climate, which influence the flora, of course. And when this Swarshia mass flowers, they know that the northeast monsoon has set in. And in December, when the Nilgiri rhododendron is mass flowering, they know the frosty season has begun of winter. So they have used cyclic flowering species to determine a person's age and wisdom. We all know that the Nila Kurunji flowers in 12-year cycles, but the Todas go one step better. They know Strobilantha species that flower in precise cycles of 6, 10, 12, and 18 years and use them to determine a person's age. Honey gathering is unique. You have this honeycomb embroidery motif of theirs. prehistoric rock art around the Toda hamlet, several thousand years old. They basically collect honey from these tree cavities of the shola trees. And this is of Apis cerana. In a very eco-friendly way, the brood portion is left untouched. As inspiration, what you see the priest holding that churning stick, according to their story, was inspired by the flowers of Cereopegia pusilla, and you can see it looks just like the miniature churn stick. As this is the 6 o'clock flower, because it flowers at that time in the evening, irrespective of weather conditions. This gentian is known as Arkil poof in Toda, which means the worry flower, because if you hold it by the stem, it will close, and it's so accurate that if you're slightly worried, it'll take a few minutes to close. If you're very worried, it'll close in a flash. It's very, very accurate. And, after building a temple, the priest has to purify it, and he uses the bark of Meliosmia simplicifolia, which incidentally, no lay Toda is allowed to handle. He's purifying the temple, and then he begins his ritual activities there. Again, some sacred trees. I'll go over it very fast. So when certain plants are mass flowering, the Todas know that will be followed by the honey season of a particular properties, and that will be followed by the wild fruit season. And today, when this doesn't happen quite often, they tell you that there's some climatic change happening. Utilitarian. Even today, for all Toda ritual purposes, fire has to be made only by Lithia whiteana by friction, whether it's lighting the funeral pyre or the temple lamp. Yeah, we'll skip over these. These are some endemic balsams of the Nilgiris that the Todas relate to. These are balsams and orchids that the Todas relate to. I'm not going to mention them, but some of them are related to the Todas. So I'll come to this. This is the thatch grass, which is found in the wetlands of the Nilgiris, Eriochrysis rangacharai, which they use to thatch their temple. They cannot substitute it. It's on the brink. What we need is an IIC project to propagate this species. Otherwise, the Todas temples will just disappear. We'll go over these fast. These are Drosera insectivorous plants the Todas relate to. What he was drinking was, the leaves are anti-cancer properties. And I'll just tell you about this orchid very briefly. This is Satyrium. And the bulbs of this have been consumed by the Todas like a kind of an energizer, like a ginseng, if you will. And this plant is known as Eshtquad in Toda. Eshtquad means bullock horn. Bullock was a very rare animal in the upper Nilgiris. Because if you pull out one of these flowers, it looks like it has a twin spur, and as you know, twin spurs are very rare. So this is the botanical knowledge of the Toda people. This is a Micromeria biflora, and they also have, these hydrology conservation species. You can see jugs of water in its rosette of leaves. This is Hediotis verticillaris. They protect them around their water sources. Also the Uticularia. So recently we described 3 new species of balsams and gave them Toda nomenclature. I was very happy to do that. The first is impatient Temushkulnai. Remember the hill Temushkuln in the afterworld. This is Impatiens Gortiana, after the deity hill Gorti, and Nautiana because that is the name of the genus Impatiens given by the Todas. So their relationship with nature, this is very important. You see, the Todas used to herald the onset of winter by using fire sticks to ceremonially fire the grassland. And although this has been found to be beneficial, it has now been proscribed. People have spoke about this. So the Todas only follow indirect methods of ecosystem management like prayer ceremonies. There is one indirect method of ecosystem management, that is pouring salt water for the buffaloes, that each and every Toda clan has to still perform during all the seasons of the year. And even today, a failure to perform the salt water ceremony is deemed an invitation for ecological disaster. And they also go to this hilltop, deity hill, Conte, and with the priest, they pray for ecological well-being. They actually pray for ecological well-being. It's very important. And the Todas are one of the last remaining vegetarian groups, indigenous groups left in the world. This is some of their festive fare. Toda embroidery is all inspired by nature. The hills, the valleys, the birds, the sun rays, we got a GI patent for this. At NGO we got that. And this is the eye of the peacock feather pattern, mat plant pattern. This is the mat plant itself. This is the hare's ears pattern. So we've come to the end. This is the Toda song. One minute. So one man here will be a master composer, and he'll be composing impromptu in couplets that rhyme with one another. So every Toda song, which is composed impromptu, is a form of oral poetry that has been described as a combination of Vedic, Homeric, and Hebrew. And incredibly, each word of these couplets is in 3 syllabic units to allow the 3 footwork movements. 3 syllabic units words. to allow the 3 footwork movement. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tarun. I mean,
Thank you.
seriously, thank you. No, seriously. Dr. Tarun has come all the way from Otty, and being a dentist by profession, this obviously is something that has touched your heart for some reason, and the amount of research and the amount of knowledge that you're able to share about it. I want to go straight to an important question. Yeah. What are we supposed to do with this knowledge? Because when I've traveled overseas, a lot of these kind of very, very old traditional tribes, the entire area is kind of cordoned off and, made into more of a museum kind of a space where one cannot degenerate it. At the same time, one can experience it and learn from it. I don't see that obviously is not the model that is working over here. So these kind of traditional practices, I mean, not many of us know about it. How do you expect it to even last for another 5-10 years for them to be able to preserve it, protect it, and pass it on to the next few generations?
So the very fact that it is realized, I think Sukumar will tell you they've now established that the Todas were here 3,500 years ago, right, in your study. So the Todas were there 3,500. So if it has gone on for 4,000 years minimum, 3,000 to 4,000 years, basically I think we are trying to ensure that this knowledge is passed on. I've documented most of it in my book, and now I'm getting my book translated into Tamil. That's my next thing. So the Todas can actually benefit by the prayers and some of these things here, or the younger generation, of course. So that's the next step. And we also plan to hold some of these camps, for them, where the elders actually impart it to them. So we're going into that stage.
So one is for that indigenous knowledge to be passed on from one generation to the other.
Yeah.
But you see the rapid pace of development.
Yes.
I mean, I know that out of my 100 friends, 75 of them have a house in Kannur.
Yeah.
And the rest have it in Otty. Okay. I mean, this is the way Otty and Kannur and the Nilgiri Hills has become a holiday home for many people in various parts of India, especially in Bangalore.
Yeah.
So what is being done with the Nilgiri landscape, as we had spoken earlier in the earlier discussions? What is being done to preserve the Nilgiri landscape and this particular the Todas?
The Toda, of course, we are already working through our NGOs, but since you brought up this question, I would like to mention, I think I've got some of these invites here. We are having a Nilgiri Scapes conference where we will have NGOs, we will have academics presenting papers, and also the government people. We're also probably having a minister coming in from the Tamil Nadu government. We are having bureaucrats. So we're going to discuss some of these points very, in detail. And the Tamil Nadu government also, recently they had something, they had a workshop in Otty, was making Nilgiris the first carbon neutral district in Tamil Nadu. So we participated, and they have an action plan working. So I think the government is really thinking in certain of these lines on how to do some of these things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tarun, and you can be rest assured we're going to come and visit your space.
Please come.
Tarun, that was wonderful. I mean, I only gave some evidence that the Todas probably went up much earlier than what historians have assumed. Nothing more than that. I know nothing about the Todas themselves, actually, and wonderful listening to you. My main question to you is, what's the impact of all the invasive species that have come into the grasslands? The Australian wattles, Acacia mianzi and so on, which were planted decades ago. Yeah. I wrote a paper 30 years ago saying that with global warming, these wattles will spread across the grasslands. And the grasslands are really the habitat for the Todas over there. And every time I go to the Nilgiris, I see these wattles having spread to larger and larger areas. What's the impact that has actually made on the lives of the Todas?
Tremendous. It's immeasurable, actually. It's immeasurable, the kind of thing they had on their sacred spaces and all. And it's not only the exotics, wattle and the eucalyptus that you talk about, it's also the reservoirs. Both of these, they flooded they blocked their migratory pathways to go to their sacred sites, and of course, townships, other things. And it's had a devastating problem on the ecology. So,
and Dr. Tarun was just saying that ISE, and I'm on a serious note, that some of us need to be engaged.
Yeah, some of that grass, like the thatch grass which they use, Edhwehlynawd. I mean, we sent the samples, I think, about 20 years back to Kew Gardens and got it identified. It was Edhwehlynawd rangachare, which happens to be endemic to the wetlands of Nilgiris. It's not found anywhere else, and now it's on the brink. And the Todas are not allowed to substitute that for their temples with any other species. So I've been shouting this for the last 25 years and more, saying that if this species goes extinct, an entire culture goes. And very interestingly, when we did this study more than 20 years back of this Edelweiss Rangachari, what the Todas called Avul, the red data book of Indian species says it's extinct long back. But the Todas are collecting truckloads of it, even though it's something. So that's another story by itself. But the point is that we need to have a thing to propagate this and do something. And there also, we did a study. I didn't wait for anybody. I think Vance is sitting here. He's forgotten. You know, Vance, around 25 years back, I said, Vance, you know, there was a student who was ready to do this, one of Priya Devada's students, to do it. And so Vance, from the Wild Foundation, sent $1,000, which that day was about 30,000 rupees in those days, I think. But quite a bit of money, 25 years back. And I knew promptly sent $1,000. And we actually studied, I have that report with me also still. And what is amazing is, you know, we were talking about fire and I also spoke about it. The wetlands which had the most biodiversity, I mean, a layperson would say, oh, this wetland has 70 species, so it must be healthy. But those were the most disturbed wetlands. Because as you know, many of these grasses require fire. So we had the forbs and other species which shouldn't have been there, dominating. So we had 70 species in the most disturbed, degraded wetlands. But the healthy wetland, which had this Edelweiss and other thing, had only about 20 species. So, you know, we have to understand some of these things. When an ecologist comes new, he say, wow, there's a lot of biodiversity, but you have all the wrong species sitting there. They're not supposed to be in the wetland anyway. So we need to have a project where we can, where we can propagate and revive the species of this thing. Because what happened was, what I mentioned in this report also, because of the planting of eucalyptus and wattle, the wetlands got disturbed. Earlier, the Todas, I'm told 40, 50 years back, could just go down to the closest wetland from their hamlet and pick up this grass and thatch it. Now it's not there anymore because of these tree plantations or the reservoirs which have flooded them. So only the southwestern edges of Nilgiris towards Korakunda, you know, that Korakunda belt, there you have about a dozen, maybe 7, 8 wetlands where you have this grass. But
so I assume your conference is going to be addressing these issues.
No, it's not an ecological, I mean, it's not going to be so in depth of this thing. So
but
I'm going to be talking
to address this issue because this is the way to protect it.
Yeah. So at this Nilgiri Safe Conference, there'll be Toda people there, there'll be indigenous people there, you know, everything will be discussed in a way. In a couple of days, but we need some scientific know-how also. We've done the groundwork already about this grass, so it shouldn't be that difficult. And this Priya Devada student, he was actually with our EBR trust for a long time. So EBR actually stands, EBR is I've got the brochure there, I can give that to you. There's a flyer there. It's called the Edhwehlynawd Botanical Refuge Center Trust. So where we are doing, the Toda Nalavaazhvu Sangam is, I'm the only non-Toda member. And I'm the only non-Toda who speaks Toda, in fact, and there. So the EBR is Edhwehlynawd Botanical Refuge Trust, where we have bought some tea estate land, about 25 acres, in a very pristine place. So we are removing all the tea and restoring it to Shola grassland, wetland, and doing all that. We have our own nursery and everything. But Edhwehlynawd in Toda means a place with a beautiful view. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to restore, these traditional landscapes of the Nilgiris. But EBR, we call it EBR because most people can't pronounce it there.
Anyway, thank you so much,
Thank
Doctor.
you.
Thank you so much for your time and for everything. And your jacket is looking great.